Imagine you are, designing a utopia.
Right.
You pick the exact elements, you set up this perfect peaceful sanctuary, but because of one tiny, totally invisible miscalculation, you accidentally build a gladiator arena.
Oh, wow. Yeah, a literal battleground.
Exactly. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring a microscopic, high-stakes world where a carefully curated, enclosed environment just completely turns into an aggressive war zone over a single biological glitch.
It's a really fascinating look at how fragile a constructed piece actually is, especially when you are managing any kind of closed system.
And whether you manage a team of people at an office or, I don't know, a complex project or literally an aquarium, there is so much for you to pull from this scenario.
For sure, there's a lot to learn here.
So we're looking at one specific, incredibly insightful primary source today. It's a brief journal entry from a writer named Eng.
Right, the fish keeping journal.
Yeah. The post is called Notes on Fishkeeping, Part 288, and the subtitle is The Challenges of Keeping Golden Mbuna.
Or melanochromis-auratus for the scientifically inclined.
That's the one. And this was published back on July 13th, 2026.
Okay, so a fairly recent look into this hobby.
Right. And Eng sets up this aquarium with a very clear, very peaceful intention. The goal was to keep a group of these Golden Mbuna, specifically hoping there would be a mix of males and females in the tank.
Right, which makes total sense.
The idea being they would bond, they would mate, and you would get this, harmonious natural cycle.
Yeah, that's a pretty standard expectation for a breeder or really any enthusiast. You provide the habitat, nature takes its course, and that energy flows into reproduction and community building.
But nature took a very dark detour here.
It really did.
Aang writes this one line early on that completely flips the narrative. Quote, "Unfortunately, I believe they're all males."
Yeah, that single demographic reality is where the entire social structure of the tank just collapses.
Okay, let's unpack this. Aang has a tank full of dudes.
Right, just...
And in my head, without the pressure of having to constantly impress females or fight over mates, shouldn't this just be like a peaceful bachelor pad?
You would think so, yeah.
Right. I mean, how does the complete absence of females fundamentally break the intended dynamic of this environment instead of just, calming it down?
Well, what's fascinating here is how biological energy works in these systems.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't just evaporate when you remove an outlet.
Oh, interesting. So it has to go somewhere.
Exactly. In Aang's intended scenario, a huge portion of the Mbuna's daily energy and focus would be directed toward courtship.
Right.
They would be showing off, pairing up, reproducing. That is their biological directive.
Like a full-time job for the fish?
Precisely. It keeps them occupied. So when you suddenly remove mating entirely from the equation because, there's zero females, the drive has to be rechanneled.
And Aang immediately observes this, right?
Yeah, Aang notes that the fish started, quote, fighting over resources, particularly regarding territory within the aquarium.
Wow. So without a mate to pursue, the only thing left to care about is real estate.
Pretty much.
It makes me think of designing a communal living space. You set up this lovely living room and kitchen, expecting a balanced group to move in, form relationships, live together.
A nice, cohesive environment.
Right. But due to some massive clerical error, you accidentally lock a dozen hyper-competitive individuals in a studio apartment with only one chair.
That is a stressful image.
The physical walls haven't changed at all, but the demographic reality has completely warped the whole space.
And in the absence of reproductive opportunities, the only biological currency left for these fish is control.
Right, controlling the space.
The aquarium stops being a habitat and becomes this finite grid that absolutely must be claimed. If a fish cannot fulfill the biological imperative to mate, it doubles down on the drive to secure its surroundings against competitors.
So it's not just random anger?
No, not at all. It's a highly calculated, instinctual reallocation of energy.
Which feels, honestly, a lot like what happens when a team at work suddenly loses its main project goal.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Right. Like, without that productive outlet, people start getting territorial over minor things. Office politics flare up because the energy has nowhere constructive to go.
That is a very apt parallel. When the primary objective vanishes, the focus shrinks to dominating the immediate environment. And, well, in a fish tank, that domination is entirely physical.
But in Aang's tank, this territorial shift doesn't just cause a little friction, it gets severe.
Very severe.
The journal notes that because of this intense fighting, they are, quote, now left with only these few in the population.
Yeah.
And that word left is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. It implies this brutal process of elimination.
It points to a rapid decimation of the tank's population, for sure. And I think we have to look at the mechanics of why it's so severe.
Okay.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the danger really stems from the fundamental nature of an aquarium itself. It is a completely closed system.
Wait, but fish fight in the wild all the time, right? I mean, these cichlids are naturally aggressive anyway.
They are.
So why is it suddenly a massacre just because it's indoors?
Because of the glass.
The glass.
Yeah. In nature, say, Lake Malawi, where these cichlids originate, if two male Mbuna have a territorial dispute, there's a clear mechanism for resolution.
Which is what?
The loser, the subordinate fish, just submits and swims away. It relocates to a less contested rock. The conflict effectively ends the moment the loser leaves the victor's line of sight.
Ah, I see. So in the tank, there is no away.
There is no away. The biological hardwiring of the dominant Mbuna tells it to drive the rival out of its territory. But the physical boundaries of the glass prevent the rival from actually leaving.
Wow.
So the victor keeps seeing the threat, which constantly re-triggers that aggressive hardwiring. The attacks just continue indefinitely.
Because submission isn't enough.
Exactly. The dominant fish requires absence, and the tank makes that impossible.
That is incredibly bleak. I mean, the environment itself makes the instinct lethal.
It really does.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me, though. Ang is documenting this attrition, just watching the numbers drop, and notes that a clear alpha has emerged. Ang even snaps a photo of this alpha for the journal.
Right, documenting the victor.
And I have to admit, it's a bizarre, almost uncomfortable position for a manager or a curator to be in. You've created the space, the system is actively failing, and you're just passively watching this hierarchy violently establish itself.
It's the harsh reality of artificial ecosystems. Dominance in this closed grid directly dictates survival. The emergence of that alpha wasn't just a natural hierarchy settling smoothly.
No, it was brutal.
It was completely forced by the environment. And now, the manager has to figure out how to stabilize whatever is actually left.
Which forces Ang to try and fix the broken ecosystem. The alpha is ruling the survivors, the population is decimated.
Yeah.
And the logical next move seems pretty obvious, right?
Yeah.
You introduce females, you dilute the aggression, balance the demographics, give that biological energy its proper outlet.
That is the most textbook biological solution you could ask for. If the problem is a demographic imbalance, you introduce the missing demographic to restore the intended flow of the environment.
Right. But this is where the textbook runs face first into reality.
It always does.
Ang writes, quote, "Judging from the current stock in fish stores these days, I doubt we will find any until a new batch becomes available."
It's a striking collision between nature and commerce.
So what does this all mean? Bizarre is the word I'd use. I mean, think about the scale of this. You have this ancient, primal, territorial drive tearing an ecosystem apart on a microscopic level. It is literal life and death.
Right.
And the resolution to this biological crisis is entirely dependent on what the local pet store happens to have in stock on a Tuesday.
It highlights a really frustrating bottleneck in ecosystem management. You can understand exactly what's going wrong. You can have the perfect theoretical solution completely mapped out. But you are still tethered to the physical logistics of the outside world. The manager's brilliant strategy means absolutely nothing if the supply chain doesn't cooperate.
It's like trying to fix a toxic team culture by hiring a specific type of mediator, but HR tells you there's a hiring freeze until Q3.
Oh, exactly.
You know the exact fix, but your hands are tied by bureaucracy.
And Ang is completely paralyzed here. The problem cannot be solved until that new batch arrives. The biological timeline is forced to just pause for the retail timeline.
So you're just stuck in suspended animation, watching the alpha patrol the ruins of the tank.
Waiting on a delivery truck.
Right. And because the supply chain is frozen, Ang can't buy more Mbuna, so that roadblock forces a pivot.
Plan B.
Yeah. If you can't balance the tank with their own species, the next logical leap is introducing a completely different enforcer.
Right. Ang starts contemplating mixing the remaining Golden Mbuna with other cichlids, and specifically notes, quote, especially larger ones.
Okay, I need some context here to make sure I'm following this. Mbuna are a type of cichlid, right?
Yes, they are.
So the idea is to bring in fish from the broader family they belong to, but just bigger ones, hoping a larger relative might act as like a bouncer for the tank.
That is the thought process, yeah. Introduce a larger mass into the environment to intimidate the smaller aggressive fish into backing down and keeping the peace.
It makes sense on paper, Big fish scares little fish.
Sure.
But Aang very quickly shoots down their own idea in the journal, writing, quote, "However, given their notoriously aggressive behavior, I highly doubt that would work."
This raises an important question about how we actually quantify power within a system.
What do you mean?
Well, we generally assume that physical size equates to dominance. The larger the asset, the more control it exerts.
Right, but surely a fish 3 times the size of the Mbuna could just swallow it, or at least severely injure it. Why wouldn't the Mbuna register that massive physical threat and just, hide?
Because we are dealing with the concept of notoriously aggressive behavior? In this specific species, their psychological hardwiring does not factor in the size disparity in the way we'd expect.
Really, it just ignores the size.
Pretty much. Their absolute uncompromising drive to defend territory just overrides the instinct for self-preservation against a larger threat. It's a form of biological asymmetrical warfare.
That is wild. I am imagining putting a small, incredibly angry badger into a cage with a full-grown bear and hoping the sheer size of the bear will intimidate the badger into just sitting quietly in the corner.
Good luck with that.
Right, the badger doesn't care how big the bear is. It's a badger.
That analogy captures the dynamic perfectly. In this ecosystem, sheer aggression is a far more potent currency than physical mass.
Wow.
A larger cichlid might have the bulk, but it likely doesn't possess the same relentless, hardwired aggression to defend space at all costs. The smaller Mbuna is highly motivated. The larger fish is, honestly, just trying to exist.
So the bigger fish is just getting nipped and chased endlessly by this tiny terror.
Yes. The Mbuna will wage a literal war of attrition until the larger fish succumbs to the constant stress.
So it backfires completely.
Entirely. Aang realizes that introducing a larger cichlid wouldn't bring peace to the tank. It wouldn't act as a bouncer at all. It would just create a new, much larger victim.
Oh, man. So the David and Goliath approach is completely off the table because the Mbuna's aggression is just too toxic to manage with size.
Right.
Which leaves Aang sort of backed into a corner here. Let's look at the board.
Okay.
Replenishing the tank with their own kind, blocked by the global supply chain,
Yeah.
bringing in a larger enforcer, ruled out because psychological hardwiring trumps physical size. Aang is completely out of proactive moves.
The manager's toolkit is basically empty. Every intervention either carries a destructive risk or is just impossible to execute.
So what is the final decision? It's a completely passive approach. The journal entry just ends with, quote, "Let's see how this goes in the coming weeks. Till the next post."
It is an admission of limited control, but honestly, it is also a highly strategic retreat.
And I think that is exactly why this tiny slice of aquarium life matters so much to you listening right now. We've been touching on this, but the parallels to human management are just stunning.
They really are.
Think about a time you were overseeing a highly volatile environment. Maybe a project went completely off the rails, or a team dynamic became incredibly toxic. The instinct is always to jump in and fix it, to, do something.
Absolutely. There is a huge internal pressure to prove you are managing the situation by taking action. Silence or stillness often feels like failure in management.
But what happens when all your proactive solutions carry massive risks, or they're entirely blocked by outside forces beyond your control?
It's a tough spot to be in.
Sometimes the most strategic and frankly the most difficult choice you can make is to simply step back, cross your arms, observe, and wait.
It requires a tremendous amount of discipline to watch a flawed system run its course without throwing gasoline on the fire, just because you feel the need to be seen doing something.
Right, action for the sake of action.
Exactly. Aang letting the dynamic play out isn't just giving up. Intervening poorly right now, say, by tossing in a larger fish just to see what happens would only make the ecosystem worse.
Let's see how this goes can actually be the smartest play on the board.
Sometimes it's the only play.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Aang's 2026 journal, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over. We've seen how this incredibly controlled, highly curated glass box rapidly devolved into an inescapable, lethal battleground, all simply because of the accidental introduction of a single-sex demographic.
A single variable shifted.
Just one.
Yeah.
So the question for you is, how much of the peace in our own constructed environments, our corporate offices, our communities, our carefully planned cities, is actually genuine, resilient harmony?
That's a great question.
And how much of it is actually just an illusion, relying entirely on a very fragile, completely accidental balance of resources and demographics, waiting for just one tiny miscalculation to turn the whole thing into an arena? Think about that the next time you design a space. Thanks for diving deep with us today.